the people run into me at the pub and ask why didn't they just fly the eagles to Mordor?
Common language of science.
Main result of the Frisian Party.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is...
If you think this is an exaggeration, the world has fallen, fend for yourself.
That is the will of Parliament and the nation. We shall fight in France.
This is Noah Martin, the creative mind of Retrospection Multimedia. You're listening to Frequency Drift, brought to you by the Retrospection Podcast Network. And now, this episode of Frequency Drift. The radio drama decline from 1960 all the way to 2000 seemed like it would be the death of radio dramas. But in 2004, a new form of audio entertainment was crafted. This form was originally called audioblocks, but eventually would become known as podcasting. Podcasting wouldn't become too popular until the early 2010s, but with this new form of entertainment came a revival of classic entertainment. Radio dramas eventually became a proving grounds for future playwrights. Since audio scripts generally did not consist of stage directions, lighting, or other features common in live performances, it made writing much easier. That, and the fact that audio plays were a lot easier to produce, too. A lot cheaper. There were a few radio dramas that came out during this time, including, unsurprisingly, The Archers on BBC Radio 4, Westway on the World Service, Super Street on the Asia Network, and Doctor Who. September 2010 saw the release of a soap opera known as You, Me, Now, which would go on to win the Best New Drama Award in 2011. This was a New Zealand radio drama, and while it did not single-handedly revive radio drama, it certainly reminded people of how entertaining audio drama can be. Podcasts started to become popular for multiple reasons. One of these reasons was that it was on-demand audio that could be listened to anywhere. For example, while operating a vehicle. It also meant that people who did not watch TV or have access to TV could still enjoy audio forms of entertainment. Audio entertainment also provided a unique way to traverse storytelling. Where once a large budget would be required to craft unique film backdrops, instead producers can use unique sound effects to achieve a similar feel. A famous example of an audio drama that broke bounds by using sound effects to create an interesting world is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. While eventually visual media would be created for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the book and radio drama would become arguably more popular than the movie. Radio dramas also saw a resurgence due to the fact that their production costs are not nearly as high as a television show. This means that they can still produce content for a dedicated fan base. This started to happen in England when the BBC owned both a television station and radio channels. This means that it cost them virtually nothing to translate old television scripts from old shows to radio dramas. Series that had been revived as radio dramas include Doctor Who, Dad's Army, Thunderbirds, and The Tomorrow People. Popular authors like Neil Gaiman have also released their works as audio dramas. Gaiman released Neverwhere, which featured a cast of television and film actors. The reason Gaiman decided to do this, instead of a television or movie release, was because he believed then that audio offered more leeway for special effects. But even though radio dramas were still being crafted, when did they become popular again in podcasts? What made audio drama great? Retrospection Radio Theater is a blast from the past with unique, daring stories told in classic, nostalgic dramas. Founded on January 25th, 2018 by Noah Martin, Retrospection Radio Theater dares to tell stories that others won't. Join us on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the latest episodes. Tell your stories Through Retrospection Multimedia, an audiovisual organization dedicated to helping you succeed, we offer video editing, live event and podcasting services, and now, for a limited time only, sign up for the Ground Up Deal. The deal includes podcast consulting, editing, and coaching services. We will also create your own podcast website and RSS feed. Order now at www.retrospectionmultimedia.com. Now, back to this episode of Frequency Drift. Podcasting is perhaps one of the most captivating forms of media. In 2005, Apple released an update to the iTunes app that supported podcasting. This helps give way to content creators like Mommycast and even President Bush, who released weekly addresses via podcast. 2012 saw the release of the hit series Welcome to Night Vale, which eventually would also become a novel in 2015 by Jeffrey Cranor and Joseph Fink. The 2012 release of the show caused a storm, and fiction podcasts to be released. Now, I'd like to differentiate something. Fiction podcasts are more of a spiritual successor to radio dramas, especially because they are not generally aired on the radio. But yet, radio is beginning to die and be replaced with podcasting, and therefore it makes sense in my mind to consider them the future of radio drama. What's nice about fiction podcasting is that they do not have to follow FCC guidelines and are generally produced independently by indie creators and sometimes by small podcast networks. As podcasting is still so new and widely available to the average person, it makes the studying of the frontrunners hard to do, much like in the 1920s when radio dramas were made initially. By 2019, Spotify reported that they had over 500,000 podcasts on their network alone. Some famous fiction podcasts include the Magnus Archives, Limetown, Wooden Overcoats, Alice Isn't Dead, Wolf 359, and the Amelia Project. All of these fiction podcasts have cemented themselves and created interesting narratives, hearkening to the old radio dramas of yore. I want to take a moment to explain why it's important that radio dramas have seen a revival recently. Besides the reasons I listed above about less budgets, effective and less costly special effects, and easier storytelling, I think it's also important that audio dramas are seeing a revival right now because it allows creators such as myself to step in and create stories that originally weren't thought possible. In fact, podcasting in general allows this. For podcasting is much like classic radio. Any creative can spend their time making and telling stories, and those stories tend to be personable, that even the large businesses have trouble trying to nail down a story like that. For instance, we've seen Limetown, a podcast, become a Facebook-exclusive television show because it was so wildly popular. Welcome to Night Vale got a book, and I'm sure there's plenty of other modern audio dramas that got attention from other forms of media. With podcasts becoming so popular, especially over COVID, not only have more podcast creators gotten into podcasting, but that means that there is more content in circulation. More unique and original stories, more hosts, more creators, more musicians, more writers, more directors, more voice actors, more radio drama. And that's what's important, because in this age of thoughtless and boring movies and television shows churned out every couple months from companies like Disney or Netflix, it's fiction podcasts that take the time to craft amazing stories you probably never actually listened to. Thank you for listening to this episode of Frequency Drift. I am Noah Martin, the creative mind behind Retrospection Multimedia. Join us Thursdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for new episodes. Please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing this podcast if you've enjoyed it. If you like Retrospection Multimedia and the content we provide, please go to our website at www.retrospectionmultimedia.com. You can donate to help keep the Retrospection Podcast Network airing by using the Ko-fi link in the description. You can also go to our website to hire us for your own podcast. Join us again next Thursday for the latest episode of Frequency Drift.